Hello and welcome to the Dailies. International coverage today centered on the emerging US-Russia peace initiative for Ukraine, with outlets highlighting its sweeping concessions and the unease it has triggered among US allies. The media also continue to examine the significance and far-reaching repercussions of Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's high-stakes visit to Washington, seen as reshaping regional alliance. Meanwhile, in the United States, attention turned to President Trump's signing of the bill ordering the Justice Department to release the Epstein files, as the White House simultaneously prepares for Friday's highly anticipated meeting with New York Mayor-elect Zohran Mamdani. We'll start with the American media, which framed Trump's signature as a rare moment where he lost control of the political narrative, forced into compliance after an overwhelming bipartisan revolt. Coverage highlighted the looming 30-day deadline for the Justice Department to release the Epstein records, while stressing the uncertainty over how much will actually be disclosed. Across outlets, the story was cast as a transparency win driven by survivors and lawmakers, and a politically uncomfortable chapter Trump could no longer dodge. The Washington Post details how President Donald Trump signed the bipartisan legislation, saying that while the bill was overwhelmingly approved in the House and Senate, the legislation indeed contains significant limitations. The Department of Justice retains the right to withhold records if they involve ongoing investigations, child abuse imagery, or victim identity. The report also emphasizes the political stakes. Now, Trump had previously opposed the disclosure, but shifted once the vote margin became undeniable. Although survivors and lawmakers celebrated the move, many remain skeptical whether full transparency will follow. The piece concludes that the bill's success may mark one of the rare moments where Trump's control over the narrative faltered. Another story grabbed attention in the US and internationally was the new US-Russian plan to end the war in Ukraine. Foreign policy reports that Steve Witkoff-led US team and Russian envoy Kirill Dmitriev have crafted a 28-point peace framework aimed at ending the war in Ukraine and drawing inspiration from President Donald Trump's Gaza Plan template. The piece explains that although the full text remains classified, the proposal reportedly covers 4 pillars: ending the combat or ending the war, security guarantees, European stability, and future US-Russian relations. The analysis also highlights that the Kremlin has signaled caution, and Kiev fears the plan may force it to concede territory and sovereignty. The piece argues this shift illuminates Washington's pragmatic pivot, trading an idealistic Ukraine victory model for a deal-driven exit strategy, while raising doubts about the viability of lasting peace and the integrity of Ukraine's interests. Politico, on the other hand, highlights how Steve Witkoff is quietly advancing a US-Russian peace framework for Ukraine through off-track negotiations that unsettle both Kiev and Washington's European allies. The piece outlines how Witkoff's back-channel efforts, including urging Ukraine to accept territorial concessions and military limitations. Of course, the proposals were met with alarm in Ukraine and also skepticism among US partners, concerned about the process's transparency and also legitimacy. While the administration presents the initiative as a pathway to ending the war, the report argues it risks undermining allied cohesion and Ukraine's sovereignty. Ultimately, it casts the push as a strategic gamble, peace diplomacy pursued outside conventional channels, with reputational and geopolitical costs. American media also reported on a surprising political encounter. President Trump will meet New York City's mayor-elect Zohran Mamdani, despite months of bitter attacks between them. The report highlights how Trump publicly mocked Mamdani as a communist, while Mamdani campaigned on resisting Trump's immigration policies and threats to cut federal funding. Yet both sides now signal a willingness to talk, with Mamdani saying he intends to confront Trump directly about affordability issues facing New Yorkers, from rent freezes to free buses and city-owned grocery stores. The piece also notes Trump's private respect for Mamdani's political skill, even as he tried to derail his campaign. The meeting is framed as a tense but necessary dialogue as Mamdani prepares to take office on January 1st. British media reported a sharp escalation as the Russian spy ship Yantar loitered near UK waters and reportedly directed laser beams at RAF pilots, prompting ministers to declare the action deeply dangerous. Outlets framed it as a symbol of looming new security threats to undersea infrastructure and marked a shift towards tougher defense posture and increased military readiness. The Telegraph contends that this marks a sharp escalation of Russia's naval provocations and signals a new phase of undersea aerial threat facing NATO states. Also, the report outlines how British forces were deployed, including frigates and patrol aircrafts, and how rules of engagement have been tightened. The piece quotes analysts who warn that such actions, especially near key undersea infrastructure, blur the line between surveillance and attack. It frames the episode as both a strategic warning and a tactical challenge for Western defense planning. Arab and international media continue to talk about Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's visit to Washington. Al Majalla published a useful infographic outlining the evolving US-Saudi relationship, described as entering one of its most robust phases. It highlights three cornerstones: Saudi Arabia's commitment to invest $600 billion in the US, and also a historic $142 billion or US Saudi defense package as well, and growing bilateral trade nearly to $39.5 billion in 2024. The piece emphasizes how Saudi foreign assets holdings in US bonds and equities, reaching up to 23%, reflect deep financial interdependence. It suggests the partnership now spans technology, energy, infrastructure, and defense, transcending the traditional oil for security model. Crucially, it frames the alliance as not merely transactional, but structural. Saudi Arabia is seeking a binding US guarantee, while the US seeks Riyadh as a strategic partner in supply chains, AI, and regional deterrence. The Times reported that soccer superstar Cristiano Ronaldo attended a high-profile White House dinner hosted by Donald Trump in honor of Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. The report notes Ronaldo's appearance marked his first public U.S. outing since rape allegations arose in 2017. Though he has never been charged, Trump also publicly praised Ronaldo, saying the star's meeting with his teenage son Barron earned him brownie points. The piece also traces Ronaldo's role as the face of Saudi Arabia's sports and investment push via his deal with Saudi club Al Nassr. It suggests his presence symbolizes the growing intersection of sports, diplomacy, and Saudi-US strategy. Haaretz examines how the US-Saudi relationship is entering a new era of deeper strategic alignment. The analysis notes that Saudi Arabia is no longer dependent on recognizing Israel to gain US partnership, altering the region's traditional balance of power. From an Israeli perspective, the piece warns that Tel Aviv is losing leverage and may be forced to adapt to arrangements in which its military edge and regional primacy are indeed challenged. The analysis also portrays the Saudi-US shift as one of the most consequential realignments in Middle East diplomacy in decades. And we'll end with the Jerusalem Post, who argues in its editorial that Israel faces a once-in-a-generation opportunity with potential Saudi normalization, which could elevate the Abraham Accords from a symbolic framework to a broad Arab-Israeli partnership. The piece emphasizes that Saudi Arabia's potential entry into the Accords would signal Israel's shift from a regional isolation to embedded collaboration with the Arab world's most influential state. The piece also urges Israeli leadership to actively shape the terms of this alignment to safeguard Israel's military edge and strategic interests, rather than passively accepting what partners propose. And ultimately, the editorial frames Saudi normalization not as an end in itself, but as a transformative step for Israel's diplomatic and security architecture. That's it for today. Thanks for watching the Dailies, only on Al Arabiya English.